Hello guys, welcome to an introduction video about how to write a best essay ever. So my name is Kelvin. The reason I'm making this video is because I realized that most of the information out there is outdated. It's no longer relevant, or if it's relevant, it lacks the oomph of how to write a proper introduction. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So any kind of paper, whichever kind of paper you are writing, whether it's 1 page, 2 page, 100 pages, 50 pages, whichever amount of the number of papers that you're writing, always has to have 3 basic elements, which is the introduction. The introduction is the first part where you introduce your paper, the main body, which contains the content of the paper, which is relevant to your writing, and the conclusion. So these 3 parts are very, very essential. So every paper has preliminary pages. Preliminary pages are the pages that comes before the introduction. So this could either be a cover page or a title page. So for instance, when you are writing maybe an APA paper, an APA paper has a cover page. So a cover page or a title page is the first paper that contains the title of the paper and your names, institution, and the rest. So as you can see that an APA 7's outline when compared to an APA 6 outline is kind of similarly different because of the running head, and then MLA is also kind of different too. So these are called the preliminary pages before just the introduction. So there are other papers or the other sections too that are important, like the declaration, dedication, acknowledgement, table of contents, and the rest. So this is mostly the outline of most papers. So for like this one is the dissertation paper. It looks kind of similar to this. So sometimes it doesn't have to contain all these other pages, but can either contain maybe, for instance, the cover page and the table of contents, or just the title page and an abstract. It depends on the paper that you're writing. Other than that, there is the abstract section. So an abstract is just a summary of what the paper is going to talk about. Usually an abstract has between 150 to 250 words. So an abstract is just a short summary that has either 150 or 250 words that tells what the paper is going to be about. So an abstract can either be descriptive, just describing what the paper is going to talk about in a descriptive way, like this paper is going to talk about this and this, or the paper will entail this and these sections. It can also be informative in nature. Informative, it could either be analytical in nature, such that it gives the various sections that the paper is going to maybe discuss in a detailed way, so that you don't waste your time reading the entire paper, yet the information that you are looking for is not in that paper. Then it can also be critical in nature. Critical is just think of it in terms of maybe criticizing. Yes, so it is kind of reviewing also. So you review the paper, you say like maybe the paper maybe is either good in such a way that it talks about this and this, or it is bad since it does not maybe talk or expound on these sections too. So critical is maybe just a way of reviewing the paper in a review kind of way. Think of it in terms of how maybe you review a movie. Maybe say that maybe Avengers Endgame was great because of this and this, while maybe let's say Game of Thrones ending was not that great because of this and that. So that is the critical aspect. It's just a review, basically criticizing. Yes, or it can be positive or negative. to say. The next part is the summary section. So a summary you can either write an abstract or a summary. Yes, so you can write either of the two, either an abstract or a summary. So the difference between an abstract and a summary is that an abstract is short in nature. So an abstract can only contain about like only 5% of the entire document. So it's short, precise, straight to the point, while an executive summary is lengthy, it's more detailed, and it is either 10% or 25% of the entire document. So an executive summary, maybe you can find it in large papers, for instance the business plan. The business plan usually uses executive summary to explain the various parts of the business and all the details. Next, we're going to dive deep into the most important section, which is the introduction. So the introduction is very essential to any kind of paper because it creates the first impression of the paper. It creates the hook of the reader. So it actually hooks or grabs the reader's attention by maybe enticing them with nice words, or just good information. Think of it in terms of maybe there are 5 or 10 newspapers on a stand, and then you want to pick one. So you're going first of all just to choose on the topic of how they've written their papers. So out of the 10, out of the 5, you're going to choose just one to purchase or to read. So that's just how you should always view your introduction. You should view it as a very, very important and essential part of your paper, because it's going to make a difference. Remember that the person is going to read your paper is most likely going to read maybe 10 other papers, 20 other papers, hundreds of other papers. So yours needs to stand out. Yours needs to create a lasting impression, if I may say, to the reader. So the best way of how to do that is you can use various ways and techniques that appeal to you personally as a writer. So you can either start with a question. So when you use a question, maybe you can use it by providing a statistical data or information on how you on your findings. So you can use a question and provide statistical data, or you can use an interesting or little known fact and give a historical information or background information of the paper. You can use a meaningful quote and maybe explain why the topic is important. You can use a shocking story and maybe show the cause and effect of certain situations. Or you can just interchange. You can use a question maybe with explaining why the topic is important. You get the point. You can just interchange any of this. So you can just play around with any of these techniques. So to show you an example, we're going to look at one of the papers that I wrote. So this is how globalization and robotic impact the future of work. How globalization and robotics has impacted the future of work. So I started by researching on the topic itself, the paper. Then I found out that there was actually an article by BBC whereby the McKinsey Global Institute found out that 1/5 of the global workforce will be affected by 2030. That is approximately 800 million global workers will lose their job by 2030. So BBC is a very renowned and it's a relevant source, unlike sources like Wikipedia, which are not that relevant. So you can either use maybe Commonwealth, United Nations. You can use maybe other sources which are relevant. Don't use irrelevant sources when you're doing your research, when you're providing your statistical data or your information. Always ensure that your sources are relevant. So in this situation, I started by writing, did you know that a fifth of the global jobs, or an estimated 800 million workers, will be replaced by robots in 2030 or by 2030? Then I cited BBC 2020 because I actually gave statistical information. You see, like 800 million workers, a fifth of the global jobs. So this statistical data always need to be cited. So when you cite, always ensure that if there is an author, for instance, if this article had been written by a writer who was maybe this Mackenzie Global Institute, if it was here the top written by Mackenzie or someone else, then you give credit to that person. But in this case there is no author, so we give credit to the BBC News. So that is one way of starting an introduction. This is the first part. So you see an introduction like this grabs the reader's attention. So for instance, maybe you're wondering, I am doing a technical paper or a technical subject. Maybe you're doing engineering, computer science and so on, and now you're wondering, how can I integrate that into my papers? So this is one paper that is engineering paper. It was a building analysis engineering paper. So you are to analyze the building, the elements of the building, the blueprints of the building. This is just good touch that I plus, just to show how detailed the building is. So this is an engineering paper. So you're wondering, maybe how can I start a good introduction, and I'm in an engineering class or I'm in a computer science class. So this is a special situation whereby you will need to go outside the normal thinking or conventional thinking. And one way is that I looked at the building as not just a conventional structure, but a unique building, a unique structure that it needed to be viewed in a different way or a different perspective. So the way that I started the introduction was what makes an architectural building stand out, separate and distinct from other conventional structures. So just by writing that, you pause, and the reader would ask themselves, maybe just a building is a building and nothing more than a building. It's just a conventional structure that stands, it's just a normal building. But I go on and I answer that by writing, such questions have puzzled many scholars, architects and structural enthusiasts to find better ways to design, shape and give new life to architectural buildings. So if you've ever seen maybe an interior design video or maybe a documentary about buildings, they always emphasize on how majestic they are, how they stand tall, how they are separate and distinct from other buildings. So I try to take that perspective and put it in this paper. So this is a unique way of starting your introduction. Other people will maybe just start by diving deep into stating how the Atlantis Brickell building was built, maybe who was the architect, maybe which year it was built, you see, and that is just a very shoddy and narrow way of writing. But you need to put on a new lens and view it in a different perspective. Next, so you can try writing maybe a paper whichever topic it is, whichever topic that you choose, and try to integrate these ways of starting maybe an introduction. You don't need to write a lengthy paper, you just need to write maybe around 275 words, that is 1 page, yes, or 300 words, and maybe send it to me through an email, which I will attach the description. Lastly, we have the thesis statement. So the thesis statement is the last sentence of an introduction that summarizes what the paper will entail. So for this paper, Globalization, Robotics and the Impact on the Future of Work, the thesis statement is this last section of the paper, which says that this paper will elaborate how globalization and automation will affect the future of work. So you can replace some parts of the topic with the synonyms. So for instance, we replace the word robotics with automation. You can also replace maybe the word work with maybe the word workforce. So you right click on the word work, you come to synonyms, and then you can choose any of the synonyms below. Alternatively, if any of these words are not favorable to you, you can use other platforms like Power Thesaurus. Power Thesaurus is a website which you can use to look for synonyms. So you come and search maybe the word work, and you can replace it maybe with employment, labor, function, task, or occupation. You can replace it with any or either of these words. So which depending on how you using it, you can use it as an adjective, as a noun, or as a verb. So depending on how you use it, you can use any of the above. I think we'll stop at that. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up or subscribe, and also I'd like you to maybe leave a comment under the description of what you'd like to discuss next, or which areas you'd like me to expound on, or alternatively you can email me at my email, which I'll leave at the description below. Thanks for watching.